What is poverty? According to the World Bank, poverty is pronounced deprivation in well-being. There are 2.2 billion children in the world, and 1 billion is in poverty. Over 22,000 children die every day around the world. That is equivalent to 1 child dying every 4 seconds.
15 children dying every minute. The cause of the deaths of these children is mainly poverty. Quoted by Anup Shah. The disappointing thing about this number is that this endless catastrophe rarely achieves headline coverage. Therefore, people have been limited from actually knowing what is going on in the real world. According to Benocrates, the infant mortality rate, which is the number of deaths of infants under 1 year of age, is much higher in developed countries because they do not have access to clean water, adequate sanitation, and medical care.
Inadequate income. Because of the overwhelming poverty, many families and children do not have the means to have suitable housing. Many children are born into poverty. They grow up on the streets or live in shelter made of scraps. Susan Mayer reported that the health of many children and adults living under this condition is at risk because it is being affected by living in damp, cold, and unsafe houses. Poor housing can cause psychological and physical health problems. Individuals with this type of homes do not have enough resources to meet their needs.
Malnutrition. Problems of hunger, malnutrition, and disease afflict the poorest in society. The United Nations stated that malnutrition has long been recognized as a consequence of poverty. Higher rates of malnutrition will be found in areas with chronic widespread poverty. Homelessness. According to Benocrates, one of the most devastating consequences of poverty is homelessness. The National Coalition for the Homeless reported that an estimated 3.5 million Americans, a third of whom are children, are likely to experience homelessness in a given year. The interesting thing is that 51% are single men. The homeless population is estimated to be 42% African Americans, 30% white, 13% Latino, 4% American Indian, and 2% Asian. According to Cintran Vélez, homelessness is due to a combination of factors, such as poverty, lack of education, low-paying jobs, unemployment, domestic violence, and many more reasons. Education. The relationship between poverty and education is particularly important because of the key role played by education in raising economic growth and reducing poverty. The better educated have higher incomes and thus are much less likely to be poor. Raising education attainment is clearly a high priority to improve living standard and reduce poverty. Benocrates stated that American society does not provide high-quality education for all students, especially neglecting those from the low-income families who need the greatest support. Poor children are twice as likely as non-poor children to have repeated a grade, to have been expelled or suspended from school, or to drop out high school, stated Gordon Dahl. Race and unemployment. This chart shows the jobless rates by race. It illustrates that whites and Asians have more jobs opportunities than blacks and Hispanics. This graph supports Benocrates because he states that African Americans and Latinos suffer higher rates of poverty than whites and Asians. Race and ethnicity affect the earnings of workers. fighting discrimination in the sphere of contract while leaving it untouched in the sphere of contact, will generally be insufficient to produce basic equality of opportunity for all individuals. Quoted Glenn.
Millions of people from different countries, mainly from third world countries, migrate to the United States to look for jobs. A documentary called Farmingville reflects the challenges the Latino community face in the small town of Long Island. It reveals the conflicted attitudes toward illegal immigration. According to Jeff Chapman and Jared Bernstein, poverty is the cause of the growing immigration population, which is composed of many low-income families. The poverty rate of recent immigrants is more than twice that of the United States.
Because of this, the poverty rate will most certainly be lower in the absence of immigration. Increasing immigrant share will raise the poverty rate. Benocratis describes Latinos and African Americans as minority groups. Minority groups may be subject to unequal treatment. Gap between rich and poor. Around the world, in rich or poor nations, poverty has always been present. The gap between the rich and the poor is quite high and often widening. According to Hope Yen, the lack of individual responsibility, bad government policy, exploitation by people, and businesses with power and influence. High levels of inequality will affect social cohesion and lead to problems such as increasing crime and violence. Politics. According to Rabellion, a credible measure of poverty can be a powerful instrument for focusing the attention of policymakers on the living conditions of the poor. In other words, it is easy to ignore the poor if they are statistically invisible. According to Benocratis, power is the ability of a person or group to affect the behavior of others, despite their resistance and opposition. Poor people lack key capabilities, such as inadequate income or education, a sense of powerlessness, or the absence of rights such as freedom of speech. Low registration rates among racial and ethnic groups are associated with social characteristics. For example, minorities tend to be younger, poorer, unemployed, and have a lower educational level. The poorest are typically isolated from society and have little representation or voice in public and political debates, making it even harder to escape poverty. Wealthier people are more likely to benefit from economic or political policies. Religion. Mark Regnerus states that religion influences a variety of social outcomes. Religion has a high correlation with poverty. According to Barry Ritholtz, the Gallup survey, which was conducted in more than 100 countries, showed that the more poverty a nation has, the higher the religiosity in that nation. Richer countries are less religious than poorer ones. According to Benocratis, people with lower level of educational attainment are generally more religious than those with higher educational levels. Poverty and environmental degradation go hand in hand. The lower your income is, the higher the likelihood that you will be exposed to toxins at home and on the job. Poor people depend on the environment for their livelihoods and well-being.